All right, today we're checking the receipts. Exactly 1 year ago, the Trump administration kicked off a massive new tariff policy. The promise? That it would spark a brand new golden age for America. So, a full year later, what does the data actually tell us? Let's dive in. That was the big promise made 1 year ago today. I mean, what a dramatic declaration, right? That a huge new tariff policy would completely reshape the American economy for the better, the beginning of a golden age. So, did it actually happen? After 12 months of this policy, it's time to go through all the promises one by one and see what the numbers really say. Think of this as our official 1 year fact check. Okay, first up, the big one, the central promise, the one that really got people's attention, bringing manufacturing back. Let's take a look at the jobs and factories. The vision here was pretty straightforward. New tariffs would shield American industry, and that would force companies to build here, hire here, and boom, a manufacturing renaissance. So, did those factors come roaring back? Well, the data shows kind of the opposite. Since the tariffs went into effect, US factories have actually shed 89,000 jobs. Not a gain, a loss. So the big question is why? How could a policy that was designed to help factories end up hurting them? And what's so fascinating here is this core paradox. A lot of American factories don't just build stuff from scratch. They're more like assembly plants, using parts that come from all over the world. So when you tax those imported parts, you're not really punishing a foreign country. You're just jacking up the costs for your own factories. And that, of course, makes the final American made product more expensive and a whole lot less competitive. Okay, let's move on to the second huge promise. This is the one that affects every single one of us right in our wallets, the cost of living. The argument went something like this. By bringing production back to the US and cutting better trade deals, the cost of pretty much everything for the average American family would go down. It's a simple, really powerful promise. But again, the data tells a completely different story. Prices didn't fall at all. They rose. I mean, just look at some of these key items on your grocery bill. Overall food prices went up almost 3%, fresh produce jumped 4%, and sugar and sweets went up a whopping 5.7%. And this timeline here shows something even more worrying. We might not have even felt the full impact yet. Economists call it a lag effect. Basically, it takes about 12 to 18 months for tariff costs to fully ripple through the whole supply chain. That means the peak price hikes for you and me, they could still be on the way. And people are already feeling it. A full 70% of Americans, that's including nearly 2/3 of Republicans, believe these tariffs have made their cost of living go up. That's a huge consensus that the policy is having the exact opposite effect of what was intended for family budgets. Okay, on to the third major pillar of Liberation Day, fixing America's trade imbalance with the rest of the world. So this is where you have to look closely at the numbers. The White House pointed out that the trade deficit with China fell 24%, which sounds fantastic. But the overall data shows Americans actually imported 4% more goods from other countries. So the deficit with China went down, sure, but our deficit with the rest of the world just went up. The problem wasn't solved, it was just moved around. And what about China, the main target of this whole policy? Well, they didn't really bend. They just found new customers. China ended the year with a record $1.2 trillion global trade surplus, the highest it's ever been. The tariffs didn't stop them from exporting. They just sent those exports somewhere else. Okay, so we've checked the economic receipts, but this story has a major plot twist, one that didn't happen in a factory or a shipping port, but in a courtroom. And this is the question that just changed everything. After a year of all this economic disruption, the legal challenges that were slowly working their way up the system finally landed at the highest court in the land. And there it is, the Supreme Court, a court with 3 justices appointed by Trump himself, ruled that the president's use of emergency powers to make these tariffs happen was illegal. Not just controversial, actually unlawful. So what happens when a government illegally collects a tax? It has to give the money back. The administration now has to refund $166 billion to the very businesses it collected the money from. The scale of that administrative chaos is just, it's staggering. But the impact wasn't just economic or legal, it was also psychological. This policy created this deep sense of uncertainty that spread way beyond America's borders, creating what one economist called a persistent fog. This quote just nails it. The constant policy changes, there were over 50 of them in just 1 year, created what you could call an uncertainty tax. Businesses everywhere just couldn't plan, they couldn't invest, they couldn't hire with any confidence, and it just slowed everything down. And you can see the global fallout right here. I mean, in Bangladesh, 4 million apparel workers were suddenly facing uncertainty. Vietnam saw a huge chunk of its entire economy put at risk. And for the first time in decades, global investors started to seriously ask themselves, wait, is America still the safest place for our money? So after 1 full year of Liberation Day, what does the final tally look like? Let's put all the receipts together on one big scorecard. And here it is, the final receipt. The promise of more manufacturing jobs, it resulted in a loss of 89,000. The promise of lower prices for you and me, followed by rising costs. The promise to shrink the trade deficit, China ended up with a record surplus instead. And the promise of a legal, effective policy was, in the end, overturned by the Supreme Court. You know, Liberation Day promised a new beginning. But as we've just seen, the 1 year receipts paint a very, very different picture. And with economists warning that the worst price hikes might still be on the way, the data suggests that while all the receipts are in, the full bill for this experiment, well, that hasn't even come due yet.